I thought that talking about certification was going to be very important. Um, the dilemmas that goes around certification, it's not simple. There are many certification. And how do we communicate those to consumer? To moderate this panel, I've asked Kate Venugopal. She works for California Wines International Marketing Sustainability Specialist. It's a long name, I had to read it. Um, it Kate is going to bring some fantastic insight because she's worked on the certification side before, so she knows what it's like as a producer when you have audit and you're trying to comply to everything, and also the difficulties and the dilemmas around certification. So thank you so much, Kate, and I will let you introduce your panel. Thank you.
Thank you. What a great group. It's such an honor to be here, and we have a really exciting panel with some incredible insight to share with you. I'm just going to tee up the panel before we start our discussion. As Michelle said, I work on international marketing. And this is after 10 years of working on building and growing a certification program. So I do have insight on both sides. And now that I'm on the marketing side, I realize what an incredible challenge we're all facing, that we're all doing, and the amount of energy and commitment that goes into the work to achieve a certification. In California, like many other regions, has a strong commitment to sustainable wine growing with a diverse array of certification options, including organic, biodynamic, regenerative, and sustainable. And we also have various sustainable certifications available in California. And these certifications are an effective approach to taking climate action, both in terms of mitigation and adaptation. I also believe that it's important when we're talking about certification to note that most of the certifications that we refer to today are really quite new in the grand scheme of things. These are based on practices that are ancient practices, and many of them coming from indigenous cultures. And they're more recently have been structured into formal standards that clarify and verify requirements. And when we try to communicate around the broad commitment of our region in California to trading consumers, we face challenges, just as many other regions do. The logo soup has become quite thick. And while this is leading to quite a bit of complexity for trading consumers, I also think that it's important to note that it's an incredible sign of the commitment to our industry to take care of our people and to mitigate climate change. I think it's important to draw attention to the common mission these certifications share, rather than trying to figure out what's the difference, which one is better. The fact that a vineyard or winery takes the time to commit to achieving a certification, I think should be recognized and celebrated. And remembering that all of these different methodologies and certifications do share a common goal to leave things better than we found them. The diversity of approaches to sustainability across the global wine community is important because it gives growers and vintners options. And optionality is important for several reasons, but most importantly, regionally specific standards have the potential to drive change at a faster rate. And on top of that, growers and vintners need options to choose a certification that aligns with their budget, with their ethos, and with their specific regional needs. So we hope to offer some valuable solution-oriented insight from this panel discussion, and we welcome you to be part of the discussion and ask questions at the end. I've asked each panelist to begin by sharing a bit about what drives them to seek certification or to prioritize certification, and also to share a glimpse of their unique perspective into certification. And so on this stage is an incredible showing of commitment from representatives of wineries who hold multiple certifications, to forward-thinking retailers who are part of a great effort of working together with their supply chains to ask meaningful questions and find impactful solutions. There's a tremendous amount of time, energy, and passion on this stage. So without further ado, I'm very honored to introduce the panel. Gilian Handelman is the Vice President of Wine Education with Jackson Family Wines, which is a global company based in California. Her unique perspective spans the industry from winemaking to wine journalism to wine education. Cristobal Undurraga is the technical director of Koyle in Chile. His work, he has worked in the vineyards and wineries from France, United States, Australia, Argentina, and now Chile. And in 2018, Cristobal was highlighted by Decanter as one of the best winemakers in South America. And Bousquet is the co-founder or the co-owner of Domaine Bousquet in Argentina, as well as Origins Organic Imports in the US, and grew up in a winemaking family, swore it off, but then ultimately couldn't stay away, which is a story I've heard several times before. And lastly, we have Barry Dick. He's the sourcing manager, the bulk sourcing manager for beers, wines, and spirits at Waitrose Trading, based in the UK. Barry holds the very prestigious qualification of Master of Wine. And Barry brings a unique perspective to the conversation, informed by both his experience as a retailer, but also as a former winemaker with chapters in Australia, France, and the US. So Gillian, if you want to kick us off, we'll start with intros before we get into our discussion.
Absolutely. First of all, it's great to be back in Canada. I'm always struck by not only how welcoming everyone is, but also the incredibly high level of knowledge. Hats off, really, consistently, amazing. Secondly, when you saw the title of this seminar, maybe you were like, certification, I better get some coffee. But when you think about it, and as the discussion unrolls, I think you're going to see that it's a really important topic that we all need to address. In many ways, sustainability is a nascent project. It hasn't been around all of that for all that long. And so what that means is that you begin to see the wine industry taking cues from so many other industries. Very, very important. But also certification is a social contract. Right? So when you suggest that you are certifying something between businesses and the consumer, it is a social contract. It's about credibility. And so that's something completely different and new in the pantheon of the industry and the way that we communicate. So I think it actually has a lot of layers that are very important to us ideologically. So for Jackson Family Wines, we are global. We're family owned, which is super critical in terms of our commitment to certification, because we own our own vineyards. In California alone, we farm 15,000 acres. And in Oregon, we farm over 600 acres. Globally, we farm several thousand. So certification allows us to provide that level of credibility, not only to our consumers, but also to ourselves. It provides a level set for us. And we have worked very hard to meet these criteria between CCSW and LIVE, both of which are very important in California and Oregon as certifying bodies. And it's an audit. It's an interpersonal audit that is very, it's deep, because you tend to take a lot of things for granted. But when you begin to really look at your practices in the vineyards, in the wineries, with your people, with your communities, the way that you expend time in your communities as employees of an organization, it becomes a much, much deeper practice. It also drives innovation. That's something that I think most people don't realize, is that when you go through the exercise of reaching these different goals, you are constantly striving for new innovation and efficiencies. So it keeps you very honest and it keeps you moving ahead. So since really for the last 15 years, the entirety of our American wineries and vineyards have been certified. And we're very proud of that. 23 of our American wineries have full certification, and over 600 of our individual wines bear logos that give a level of credibility and really confidence to the customer. Why is it important to the customer? Well, there's a lot of reasons. Again, research on certification is really in its infancy. So we don't have a huge amount of research, and I don't have a PowerPoint slide, and so forgive me, I'm going to do something terribly inelegant and read off of a piece of paper here. But one thing that we do know from Mintel, which is a really profoundly trusted research institution, is that 83% of Canadian consumers say it's hard to know what's the best sustainability choice. 83%. In terms of American consumers, 60% of them think that American companies are pretending to be sustainable. That's tough news, right? So we do realize that certification is essential and very important to continue to provide that level of credibility and the look inside the window of people who are making business decisions that matter to consumers and how they live their lives and how they spend their money. Does it matter that it's confusing? Yes, it matters that it's confusing. There are so many different certification programs and so many different promises around what we can provide, right? Consumers know now, they're beginning to understand that glyphosate's an issue. They're beginning to understand that water use is essential, that alternative forms of energy are essential. So how do you look inside these companies so that you can align your values as a consumer to be able to make those smart purchases? That's the trick, right? And there's so many people in this room. I see Anna Britton over here from Napa Green. We've seen so many people here who I admire that are doing tremendous work towards this greater understanding of certification. But what's needed next, right? That really is something that I think we're all going to be talking about. In terms of further research, we do know from New York University's Stern Sustainability Business arm that sustainable products grew twice as fast as conventional products in terms of sales in the last 3 years. We also know from the same research firm that consumers are more willing to spend the extra dollars to buy the products that they feel are aligned with their values. So these are the things that we feel confident about and that we know, but we are finding also, and the research backs this up, that the consumer continues to be confused about what certification means. So as an industry, we need to step it up. Metrics are helpful, they're useful. When we, for instance, put on our collateral that we are saving water, or that we are powering wineries with our solar, we need to make sure that the consumer understands what that means, right? So water savings, how does that matter to me? Well, it's the equivalent of 10 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Oh, now I understand. Okay, now I can relate to it. We need to speak in language that is a little more accessible to the everyday human being. Metrics are lofty. Sustainability, it's something people care about, but how do they better understand the metrics? So I'm going to stop there because I think that there's a lot of stuff that we're going to share, and also you're going to hear so many more sexy accents than my American accent.
That's great.
And prepare yourself for certificazione, okay?
That's a great start. It also makes me realize that we should do this more often. We should, because the conversation is going to be very dense in one short hour. Cristobal, would you please share your insights?
Thanks a lot, Kate, and Gillian, thanks a lot as well. And it's a big pleasure, to be here today and be able to share a little bit from my experience. Our view over the certification, as like Gillian say, could be very arid to explain it, huh? But just to introduce me, I'm study agronomy in Chile. I finished in 2000, and I came from also from a wine family. My father was from all his life, and my grandfather involved in the wine, and grew up in a winery. I grew up surrounded by vineyards, and I remember when I was studying, agronomy, and thinking the future for what to do. In the beginning, I was not related with the winemaking. Actually, I started, my first career was geography. So I was related with the land, but not with the wine at the beginning. But when I realized to become a winemaker, I was lucky, that my family, my father's family, sold the winery that they create almost 100 years ago, and was able with my family to create a new project that we start in 2006. The name is Koyle, and when we start, my family asked me for the technical direction of the company. So my first step was to think in the long term. And my first thing was, what we can do in that long-term vision to be able to be in that view that I was very sensible when I was studying. Why to use such an amount of poison in the agriculture? At least in Chile, we have a fantastic climate. And was not necessary to use fungicide, was not necessary to use insecticide, was not necessary to use herbicides. But maybe the 70% of my career was about that, how agronomy kill everything, how the agriculture can manage. At the end, how you can kill, using herbicide, using insecticide, using this and this, but at the end, the nature was like our enemies when we was affronting the agriculture, in our case, the viticulture. So that was not the way. From my point of view, and after 15 years doing, organic and biodynamic viticulture, I think, first of all, we need to admire. We need to admire what we do. We need to admire our customers. We need to admire, all that surround what we do. So first of all, that social responsibility for me, it's a key aspect that Gillian said, So when we are surrounded in a vineyard for the people who work in there, the people that we live there, and also surrounded by our clients at the end, what we are respecting what you drink as a Koyle drinker, but we want to give you, a healthy product. So we are able to make that raw material, the one and only raw material, the grapes, totally natural or almost natural, surrounded by ecosystem, that can really give that sense of place that mostly of the winemakers talk about it, when we're talking about sense of place. What we really want to do, or what we really want to say, is a biodiversity, is an ecosystem, is an holistic view over the place where we can be one more in the place, not the dominant. We can be one more who admire, because I think if we admire what we do, we will receive that admiration from the animals when we're talking about that animal care as well, That's very important. Today in our vineyard, we have a lot of different kind of animals. I always love to talk about this because we have horses, we have dogs, we have cows, we have geese, we have chickens in an interesting amount. We have more than 100 chickens, more than 100 geese, we have 10 horses, 15 cows, we have 7 dogs, and they all live together. We have sheep, we have almost 70 sheep. And this is all part of this farm, because it's more than a vineyard, it's a farm. And when we are able to leave that farm, and when we are able to change, for example, that manure from the animals, using for the compost, or that, eggs from the chickens using for feeding us, or even the meat given from the animals used to feeding us as well. But when you create that cycle in the farm, is a kind of admiration. And from my point of view, that admiration will push for a product, because we are finally making a food product. We are in our more Western culture. Wine is part of the table. And if we want to make, as Michelle say, less but better. And when we're talking about that better quality, I think is all related with that search from different point of view. I can put my eyes from some specific thing. I was I wrote here, some key drivers from us, in that searching. So in our case, for example, I'm talking about the social responsibility, the regenerative soils. That is a big issue today, that we used to hear that from the beginning when we started with biodynamic in 2008, all about that ability to capture CO2. Today in the morning, we had a fantastic seminar about the life of the soils, and I was delighted about all the view over that. When he say, talking about the animals in the soil. Animals in the soil, yeah, there are animals in the soil. It's not like big animals. There are animals, there are fungus, there are bacteria, but animals in the soil. So we have to well care as well about those animals in the soil. And to understand that there are a lot of things in that way. Biodiversity, of course, all this biodiversity, and the healthy of the plants. We are surrounded, not just vines, we are surrounded by biological corridors in our property. We have a lot of forestry in our property, and also that healthiness that will connect all this net that we have underground. So when this morning, Mark talked about not tilling the soil. And I always say, when you're tilling the soil, you destroy a little bit that connection that you have underground, because all that connection between roots, mycorrhizas, bacteria, that take a long time to build it up. When you're tilling the soil, you intervene that connection. And all that connection at the end, I think is part of the secret of each unique place to make a unique wine.
Thank you, Cristobal. And just to clarify, you've chosen to certify both organic and biodynamic. Is that correct?
Is that correct? Yeah. Since the beginning of our project, we choose both certification, organic and biodynamic.
Yeah.
My final way was that to learn how to do it biodynamically, because many projects that I met in my life in different countries where I work, those projects that really blow my mind was the biodynamic wines.
So we'll move on to Anne to give you an opportunity to share your perspective. And Anne shared a slide with me, which we are not showing, but it's an array of the logos of all the programs that her winery certifies to. And I think you're up to 12 certifications at this point. So she has some very in-depth knowledge on the certification process.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. Good afternoon, everyone. Je suis très heureuse d'être à Montréal. Thank you very much, Kate and Michelle, for having me in this panel. And I'm going to take the next few minutes to tell you a little bit about our certification journey. For me, it's a journey, and I'm still on it. So for the people who doubt, I'm French, but I'm going to talk about winery in Argentina, because I grew up in Carcassonne, in south of France, and grew up in a vineyard in a small winery that my family had, and we sold this in the 90s, and we bought a land in Yucca Valley in Mendoza, in Gualtayari, and near the small town of Tupungato. We bought a virgin land, and we started from scratch in the late 90s, a new winery called Domaine Bousquet. And what attracted us to this terroir, it has many, many good elements, that terroir. First of all, we are at the altitude of 1,200 meters. That is very beneficial. We have very high difference, strong difference in temperature between the day and the night in the summer, which is very, very good for natural acidity, for the tannins. And also, we understood very, very fast that it was a very dry climate. So, not like what the previous panel was talking about in Quebec, where we quite lucky, like Cristobal was saying, and next door in Chile, we also have a very good climate for organic, because we have to be one of the driest wine region in the world, in Mendoza. And that allows us to do organic. So from the beginning, as a family, we understood all this. We fell in love, actually, with the terroir. That's what we established there, and the winery, and starting from scratch. So when Kate was mentioning in her introduction, the certification is allowing to leave things better than what we found them. Well, in our case, we created the things because we started from scratch, and immediately we decided as a family to certify organic while we were planting. So by 2005, when we started to sell the first bottles, we were already certified organic. And for us, the certification was because not only we understood we could farm organically, but we wanted to certify immediately, because like Gilian said very well, it's a social contract. I always say, it's like when you're in a loving relationship, it's like engagement versus getting married. When you get married, that's it. You commit to the annual audit, and that's your commitment. And I committed 25 years ago to my husband. I'm a loyal person, and so we decided to be loyal to our certification, and making sure in terms of credibility, again, reinforcing the message of Gillian, is to give to the consumer, to our clients, to the retailers and the consumer, to say to them, what we say we do, and you know that, because it's behind the bottle and in the label, and because we have all the audits with international certifiers. So that was very important for us. And also, I have to say, also a bit selfishly, as a CEO, and again, echoing Gillian as a CEO or owner, it helps to organize your company, because it brings also your team to that standard of quality and commitment. And commitment is always very important in life. So you also get your team on board to commit to that. So we started then to embark on this journey with organic certification, but there is a big element here that we started from scratch in a very rural area, where we had to depend on the human resources to grow our project. You cannot do this alone. So from the very beginning, we adopted a 360 degrees of vision of sustainability. Sustainability is not just environmental with the organic aspect, but also social economic. We had to work with the community and train the workers. I mean, we were some of the first ones establishing vineyards in that area. So the local people were not trained. So thereon, it has been an amazing experience of sharing, all this social economic commitment with the community, and we're still obviously very engaged. And I studied economics. I'm an economist, and for me it was a fantastic experience to be able to do that. Coming from Europe, where I grew up, I studied in the US, and there we were doing everything from zero and growing the community. And so we certified Fair for Life a few years after, and we continued with sustainable certification, BRCS. We went on with biodynamic, and continuing with the social economic aspect. We also in 2022 got our certification for B Corp, which is very important also for us. And even though we had worked this 360 degrees vision of sustainability, B Corp is a tough one to get. It took us a year. It's very high standard, but it's involving all the stakeholders with whom we interact, with our suppliers, our clients, our employees. It's a very complete one, and very proud of having the certification. And also in 2022, we were the first winery in Argentina and the fourth one in the world to get our regenerative organic certification, which is also very important. I see this one really, I mean, all of this certification is establishing the base for the future. Like we heard this morning in the very first presentation, you know, we need, with the presentation saying about degrowth, we need maybe to slow down a little bit to think about the future with generation. Well, this is it. We have, as farmers, we have this responsibility of protecting the land for our children and grandchildren. So the organic, the regenerative, the no-tilling, everything we can do is very important. So this is a journey, but the journey is not just us as wineries obtaining the certification, working hard for it, is in establishing with our teams this commitment to it, is also working, you know, to communicate it, working with organizations, collaborating with the wineries. We are founding member of a Sustainable Wine Roundtable, whose, you know, main objective is to put all the stakeholders together, from the wine growers to the wineries, to the wholesalers, to the retailers, all together, so we can collaboratively find the best way forward to communicate our certification and make the best use of it, and communicate that to the consumers.
Thank you, Anne. I know I've heard you mention previously that one of the drivers when you were initially seeking some of your certifications was market access. And I think we're so fortunate to have Barry, who represents the retail side, on the panel to give us a little bit more insight into sort of how the market responds to certifications.
Merci. Et déjà, il faut dire que je suis irlandais, donc j'ai un mauvais accent en français et en anglais, donc je suis désolé. But yeah, look, I really wanted to start from the top down and just explain the context and the framework within which we as retailers kind of organize ourselves and develop an attitude towards certification in a commercial environment, in a, you know, obviously shops where we sell wine. So look, you guys are all very well skilled in sustainability, but you know, it goes without saying that how we arrive at a kind of a strategy for our business. It really, you know, literally goes back to the COP meetings. They agree some targets that gets, you know, developed into national targets. And if you look at, there's some really cool stuff, I'm sure you've all read it, but the UN created 17 SDGs, or Sustainability Development Goals. There's, you know, a really random number, 17. So it's very, it's a broad spectrum of different activities. If you look at that, there's really relevant stuff to us as a wine community. Climate action, life and land, life and water, social SDGs, responsible consumption and production. So that all is set, and then we look at that. And then you can really obviously break that down. We heard some great discussions today about biodiversity loss, greenhouse gas emissions, pollution on agricultural land, the use of natural resources or abuse of those, materials that we all use, glass, cork, card, and the use of water. So the business I work for is called Waitrose, which is quite an unusual supermarket. We're really like a cooperative, so it's employee owned. And we have a really lovely kind of social focused purpose and goal for the supermarket, which is to create a happier planet. So for the purposes of this meeting, it's a pretty apt purpose that the business I work for has. And using things like the SDGs, those UN SDGs, we obviously look at those and we look at the national targets for the UK, for an example. Canada will have its own. And we obviously keep an eye on that. And we obviously look at, the values within our business. Cristobal and you guys have talked about just natural values in your business. And in our supermarket, it was, established by a naturist and a guy who was very interested in community and environment. So that's part of our DNA as a business. But we obviously look at what the national government targets are, what legislation is, and we look at that. And we also importantly understand our customers pretty well. We've been in the retail business for quite a long time, so we know that we're very lucky. We're 6% of the market. We're a premium retailer in the UK, so we've got a very ethically minded consumer base, which is great. So we're probably best case scenario in terms of sustainably orientated certifications and communicating those and selling those to customers. We're also running a business, and we want to keep it profitable, quite obviously. So we obviously have to work within limitations and attitudes to quality and price, which would have been the real traditional things that we focused on and thought about when we were making decisions as a business. But that's definitely widening now to thinking about our impact as a business on people and planet. And are we meeting our own sustainability goals that we've set? You can go on our website and see what our carbon emission objectives are for 2035 to 2050. And I thought it was really great. We were talking about standing in the vineyard and making compromises around, losing some crop. And just to give an example of how that we are also trying to run a business with, this, I guess a wider range of competing, tension. We made the decision to move all of our small glass bottles. Doesn't seem a big thing, but we moved all of our small glass bottles of wine into cans. We saved 360 tons of glass in that move, which has obviously got a huge impact on our carbon emissions. We had some complaints from the customers, which I guess is the equivalent to losing a few percentage of a crop. But that decision felt right, even though we had some commercial pushback. So I think we're all having to deal with a myriad of competing ideals within a sustainable concept. So I think that was really interesting. So a lot of our focus as a business, quite frankly, is based on quality and price. We want to explain to our customers that we're selling great quality wine, and we want to talk about promotions and price, to explain where the value is. That's clearly in the current climate is really important as well. So we really focus on that, and a lot of the communication on other things, we kind of leave it to the producers and generic bodies to really drive. So sustainability really competes, as a communication point in our retail environment. And, as we all know, customers don't have a lot of time. So it is a very busy environment. So, we're often quite obsessed with making a retail shop work and selling wine. And that's why we do kind of look to you as producers to do some of the explanation in regional bodies. And some of the examples I think is really interesting about what's going on in certification. There's emerging certification coming through, like carbon footprinting. There's a couple of brands available in the UK that tell you how many grams of CO2 was essentially used to make and transport that product onto a shelf in our shop. So the CO2 calculation is really interesting as an emerging certification. Regen farming, I think, is a really great discussion. And Anne, as you mentioned, B Corp is really interesting, alongside the traditional stuff of certification like organics and fair trade, which have been around for quite a long time. And what I'm quite excited about with certification is that, the supermarket I work for is a mixed environment. So like, I think quite a few supermarkets in Canada are also mixed. And what I mean is you're selling wine with vegetables, with, tins of sweet corn. So you've got, we've got customers coming in to do their full weekly shop at Waitrose. So these customers are, buying a range of different products, and where I think you get a really good cut through with certification is when they cross categories. We call them different categories. So if you can buy an organic onion, and then you can buy an organic bottle of wine, and then you can buy, organically produced pasta, that all of a sudden has a lot more weight than things that are very specific to one particular category. In our case, that would be wine. So for that reason, I think regen farming is really, really exciting. You've got big companies, big FMCG companies like Unilever and Nestle, promoting and explaining, concepts like regen farming, which for us, I think is brilliant. We say the wine industry, we're not blessed with, a lot of margins and money. We're a very fragmented industry. We really struggle to communicate complex concepts and philosophies like biodynamics or organics. So things where we can really ride on the coattails of large organizations, I think is a really powerful conversation piece for us about the role of certification. So look, I'll stop there. I hope that gives a flavor for from my kind of view of it.
Yeah, that's terrific. That's incredible insight. I think that one of the question marks that is most looming is sort of what's the future of certification? Is it just going to be rolled into the cost of doing business? I think that we will continue to see new certifications arrive on the scene. With regenerative being probably the newest kid on the block these days. And I think that trend is going to continue. We'll see, and that's good, right? The evolution is good because these certifications are going to address current needs. But from a grower perspective, and maybe you can start with this, but do you envision that you will continue to seek new certifications as they roll out? And do you think that that's going to be important for you to maintain strong sales and business relationships? Or do you think it's actually just going to be integrated into whether or not you seek certification? It's just going to be the way you do your business.
Look, for us particularly, yes, we're going to continue. As I say, for me, it's a journey, and we'll continue on this journey. Also, because we've done this for so many years. In our particular case, we do sell now. For example, we've always been strong with the Nordic. Scandinavian countries as markets, and this is where actually we started to sell our first wines in the early 2000s when we got certified, because these are markets that were ahead of the curve and demanding more certified organic wines. So now after all these years, we are the #1 organic and regenerative winery in Argentina. So yeah, in our case, we start to have markets and clients that are that buy our products because of that. I shall hope that, being a big believer that I am in certifications for the reason we talked about earlier, I shall hope that this is something, yes, but it's going to become normal. But again, that's a work we need to do between all the stakeholders of the industry. And we come back to the communication issue.
Yeah, the communication issue is challenging. I mean, it's going to take, I think, some incredible collaborative effort for us to crack that code, from retailers to producers to the associations. You guys have done at Jackson Family Wines a lot of work around communication, specifically focused on sustainability communications. Do you have any sort of examples that you might want to share that you
Yeah,
see most effective?
definitely. Well, the insights that we've picked up, and I think this is very common sense, back to how you communicate with people around everyday language. We found that simply putting a logo, a certification logo, onto collateral wasn't enough. We had to have a supporting statement. So as I said earlier, what does that mean in terms of water savings? What does it mean in terms of energy that can be applied to our solar arrays? How many hours did people spend in the community? Right, giving tangible everyday examples. But I'll give you other examples that have nothing to do with certification that I think we are learning about as an industry, about how to communicate what matters to people's triple bottom line. When, for instance, we suggest, and thank you Canada for the oysters, when we suggest that Sauvignon is good with oysters, for example, and we put our certified sustainable Sauvignon in the seafood department, and we suggest that oysters are a healthy and sustainable alternative because they build jobs, they clean water, they're filled with zinc and all kinds of things that are incredibly good for you. That's not a certification statement. That is a partnering statement that we believe is good for the economy and good for the planet. It has nothing to do with certification. So there is the statement supporting certification, and then there's hanging your ass in the wind to do the right thing.
I also think that a question that hasn't come up in any of your comments so far is the most basic question. Is certification critical for demonstrating your commitment? Or can a producer follow a methodology of organic or biodynamic and not certify and still be respected?
It's a good question, Kate, because always starting from the certification point of view, we took, in our case, the certification as a technical support. When we decided to go over organic and biodynamic both, we didn't know about it. So we read a lot, but another thing is with the guitar in the hand, So when you're going in and you want to do it well, I think the certification must be looking as a technical support. And every year of certification, you're doing better and better. They will give you some advice. They will try to correct you. And there are people who will, push in that correct way. For us, the big trends today in terms of helping to do it better is to create community. In Chile, last year we created the Chilean organic wine growers, that today we are 10 wineries. So that is a base of 10 technical support where we can share experience, we can share also, the interest for more growers, more producer, more buyers as well, So in that way, today we have that group. And for me, the certification, of course you can jump it and you can do it by your own, but I think it's always better, especially in this way, to have a standard to start. And that standard, is the minimum. After, if you want to give you your own, going up and up, I think it's the time. And we needed that.
Yeah, I think the acknowledgement of the peer-to-peer engagement and information sharing is so important. And I think it's one of the areas that the wine industry has really excelled in. And I think this is case in point that we're all here. And while we're all here, I'd like to give you an opportunity to ask questions. I know our panelists has loads more to share, but I do want to open it up and let the audience chime in if you have any burning questions.
Des questions dans la salle?
Hi, thank you very much for the panel. It was very interesting. My name is Maria Isabel. I'm a wine writer and I also work in written communication. I was wondering, I mean, there are a lot of wine writers in here. What do you wish or what do you think uh, we need more of when we communicate about this certification to kind of diminish the confusion amongst the consumers? So what do we need more of and what do we need less of in terms of communicating and making consumer understand what are these differences?
Barry, do you want to take this?
Yeah, no problem. Hi. I think what do we need more of? We need more clarity, more agreement, more alignment, more collaboration. What do we need less of? Yeah, I think all of the opposite of all of those all of those things really. Yeah, I think that's pretty clear, especially if you look at things that are organic. There's some great examples of, different standards, and if you look at it from the consumer end, they just think organics is obviously there's no, pesticides or anything added in both the vineyard and the winery. So, I think it's more alignment would be great, and would just make the consumers' lives a lot easier. There's definitely, consumers really respond very well, I think, to little nuggets, and they've got to be pretty simple little nuggets for most of your mainstream consumers, really. I think there's definitely some who are highly engaged, who will, know everything about biodynamics or, the latest sustainability thing, but they're pretty rare. So I think that short list of more is okay.
Yeah, I think I would also add that I think storytelling plays a really important role in this communications effort. Information and data are important, and snazzy statistics are really helpful. But I think what's really most impactful is to connect emotionally with consumers in a more simplified approach with one story at a time, because the work that's being done by the folks here on the stage is so comprehensive, and I think that's where the challenge. That's where we first meet the challenge, and how do we possibly summarize all that we're doing so that the consumer really understands our commitment, because it's so deep, and just maybe trying one story at a time.
I could give a really nice example. I met a lovely French producer who did like a ton of research, like pages and presentations of how they've analyzed the soil, and they had a brand that they talked about a hedgehog, that they improved the life of this hedgehog from the biodiversity. So they just talked about the hedgehog, and that brand was very successful and they got massive engagement. But behind it there was just this absolute mountain of work. But the hedgehog was the thing that did it. So,
any other questions?
Yes, and I think, again, specifically for Barry, at Waitrose, is there some way you can track which types of certification actually resonate most with consumers? And I have a two-part question here. And second of all, because you are also selling food and there's certifications for food, is there a drop-off with wine? And if so, how much of a drop-off? Because I think there's still something to be said about people buying on price.
Look, I would love to tell you that I've got the most amazing data analytics at my fingertips. Sadly, that's not the case. Like, we really struggle for a lot of data and information, and I think sustainability is really driving a need for really, really granular detail. I heard a great analogy about, we all had to figure out how to explain to, say, retailers like us, the technical specification of a wine, like what was in it, what yeast was added, and a huge big long list. And we're now moving into a time where to kind of show our credentials for sustainability, whether it's organics or just now moving into a space where we've got to show the carbon footprint of a product. So all of that data collection is going to be immense, and we will then start to have, I think, better information. I've got a very basic list of organics that I can see. We could do a really manual split about whether they're selling, but definitely at the minute, with, I think you're alluding to the the kind of economic challenges at the moment, and there's always a drop off we see with sustainably messaged products, and customers move towards more promotionally led brands and activities. So that's definitely what happens. But I wish I could tell you what happens exactly with different certifications. Unfortunately, I haven't got quite there yet.
So we have one more question over here.
Bill Riddlemeyer from Southbrook Organic Vineyards. Barry, you're in the lucky position. I wish the head of the SAQ was still
Jeez,
here.
I played rugby. My neck doesn't work anymore.
I'm an ex-supplier to Waitrose and would love to get back. But my question would have loved to have been to the head of the SAQ. We're talking about what we as producers are wanting to do, but really the question is, what is the buyer, and I don't mean the consumer, I mean the buyer, willing to do? Are you willing to pay extra for organics, remembering that if you get an increased price for your product, then you're making more money as well? You're in the lucky position that Waitrose is really unique in the supermarket business in England, because you're very much quality oriented and focused on organics, unlike Sainsbury's, Tesco, that sort of thing.
I'm sure
the
if they were
SAQ
here,
is
yeah.
the worst example. Or no, the LCBO is worse.
Look, it's a great question. Look, as buyers, we're all pretty aware of what we can sell and what the consumer is willing to pay, and that definitely allows us a certain flexibility. The margins that we need as a retailer are pretty reasonably fixed. We don't apply a different margin mix to sustainable products compared to conventional, so they have to live with the same challenges. But if we know that a customer is, if we know a certain say organic did have a £2 a bottle, I guess flexibility on pricing, then we would probably look to exploit that really from a margin point of view. But that would kind of naturally happen if that was the case. Look, I think that's a great point. And we're certainly now looking at, as I said in my intro, we've now got some pretty clear sustainability goals to meet. Things like biodiversity loss are maybe quite difficult to kind of quantify, but we're absolutely looking at our sustainability goals and how do we get there. And I think things like carbon emissions as a tangible example towards that mean that we're sort of looking at our range saying, actually, we need to start selling more bag-in-box or more wine in cans, the example that I gave. So, what do we need to do commercially? And those can often be quite difficult decisions. As I say, we took a risk with the small bottles. And I think if we are going to, in a meaningful way, hit our sustainability goals, we're absolutely going to have to respond commercially and start working in a different commercial way. And look, I think that's a really fair question. So how do we encourage selling more organic wine? We do things like, we group organic and B Corp wines together, and we'll effectively fund that as a retailer. We would normally charge conventional brands quite a lot of money to get on that, what we call secondary space. But, we'll take that, I guess we'll lose that cash that we would normally have brought in to try and promote to our customers because we feel that's the right thing to do. So we maybe do it more in terms of the promotional space rather than a straight margin drop.
Very good. We have time for one last question. Let's see.
Thank you. My name is Katia Ravenot, and I work in sustainable agriculture. My question is for Anne Bousquet. First of all, congratulations for your Fair for Life certification. I work with the standard, and I know, what I'm here. I know that I know what the type of work that it requires to get a Fair for Life certification. So congrats to that. My question is, you mentioned you have a regenerative organic agriculture certification also. I'd be curious to know with which standard. The only one that I know of is the one from the Rodale Institute in the United States. I was just wondering if your regenerative agriculture certification was from that institute or from some other standard. Thank you.
Right, it's the ROC, from the Rodale Institute. Yeah, and thank you for your kind words. And it's also englobing, animal welfare, workers. It's quite a complete one also that goes really hand in hand with our B Corp, and plus, more and more long-term sustainable practices in the vineyard. One of them is tilling. We gave up tilling about a year and a half ago. And very happy with it, and looking always for new plants to plant in the lines, to have this very dynamic ecosystem in the vineyard. We have the sheep and the chicken, and everybody is, like Cristobal was saying, everybody is making their participation to the lively ecosystem. So yeah. This is regenerative, but thank you very much.
So I think our time is up. So I'd like to take a moment to thank our panelists. And I hope the conversation continues, both here in Montreal while we're together and beyond. I think there's an incredible willingness to collaborate and to problem solve together from all aspects of the industry and value chain. And I want to thank you all for being here, and especially thank you to our panelists for sharing your insights. It was a pleasure to be up here with you.
Thank you.